What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some Owlcat Games news, just kind of very broadly rounding up everything they've got going on, as they've recently been in various bits of gaming news that individually would have been kind of difficult to cover. However, I did still want to talk about them, and so I decided to make this video instead. Now, beyond that, sorry if I sound a little bit strange. I've had like a weird sore throat the past couple of days. But otherwise, let's get on to it. So we've got some information about Baldur's Gate 4 very broadly. Don't get too excited though. A bunch of stuff for the Expanse, Osiris Reborn, a couple of things here and there. So let's start with the biggest one first, the Baldur's Gate 4 stuff. So one of the co-founders of Owlcat Games recently sat down for an interview with IGN. I'll post the link to it down in the description below. And there was a lot of great information in there, as you would probably expect. For starters, Owlcat Games has apparently grown to 600 people all in all, which is very large. I did not realize their headcount had gotten quite that big, though it does go a ways to explaining how they're juggling so many projects at once. We've got Osiris Reborn, Dark Heresy, we know they're working on a couple other things that are unannounced, and with 600 people, I would imagine that pretty much explains that. We also got confirmation that Rogue Trader is by far their best-selling game so far. And at the same time, they also confirm that the Expanse Osiris Reborn is in fact a bit of a risk for the studio, but I've actually had a chance to play that one previously, so it's shaping up pretty well. And there's a lot of people looking forward to it as it stands. A big part of that interview specifically was kind of referencing Baldur's Gate 3 and how it had an effect on the CRPGs that Owlcat makes, in particular the sort of boost that Baldur's Gate 3 doing so well actually gave to Rogue Trader. The way Owlcat sees it is that that boost in interest in CRPGs pushed a lot of people to try out things like Rogue Trader, etc. And so while Rogue Trader was not a viral hit, it still did very, very well for the company. Now, with some of that conversation, it's probably not much of a surprise then that it shifted towards, is that something Owlcat would be interested in doing? And long story short, it sounds like kind of. We did not get confirmation that they are actually making it, of course, and to be honest with you, I doubt they'd be talking about it like this if it were in fact in any sort of production. But in particular, it was described as being a great challenge for the studio if they would make something like that. However, it was also pointed out, I think very correctly, and the thing I want to talk about here in just a moment, that anybody trying to follow Larian Studios' Baldur's Gate 3 by copying it would be doomed to fail. I think Baldur's Gate 3 works specifically because it is Larian, and anything to do with a Baldur's Gate 4 would need to be also very good, but also distinctly the studios that made it. And that's obviously just going to be a very difficult thing to do generally, but then we move to the opinion portion of it. So I will say that personally, if anyone were to make a Baldur's Gate 4, I do think I would want to see Owlcat doing it, but I also want to say two things can be true at the same time, and the other half of that is that while I would definitely be game for it, I also don't really feel like it's in Owlcat's best interest to be working with Wizards of the Coast right now, given everything Wizards of the Coast has going on. That place is a bit of a mess these days, and that's before you start talking about all the risks and whatnot that would be a Baldur's Gate 4 release. And so while if they chose to do this, and that was a thing they wanted to do, would I be there and show up for it? Definitely. But do I think that would be the best move for Owlcat? Not really, to be honest. But while that was obviously very interesting and everything to read, that's only a part of what I wanted this video to be about, with a good chunk of what's left also being about the Expanse. So over the past couple of weeks, we've gotten a little bit of information about the Expanse via some developer posts, which again, individually weren't really enough to make a video about, but were an interesting read otherwise. So they put out a devlog about like the origins and how some of that is actually going to work in practice. I would say the big thing there is that there will in fact be a bunch of Origin exclusive content. So based on whether you're a Martian, an Earther, or a Belter, there's stuff that you will only see as a member of those individual origins. It's also going to decide a certain level of how much people interact with and like you or dislike you right off the bat. So that should be pretty fun overall. And then much more recently, just like a day or two ago, in fact, they dropped a little bit of information about the game's specializations. Now, I gotta be honest with you, after having been able to play it myself via that playtest, none of this was exactly news to me, but still, again, a cool little update. And just if you didn't know, at the start of the game, you'll be picking a specialization. This is your initial loadout, but it doesn't like lock you into anything. You're still going to be able to pick any particular weapons or anything like that you want to level up. It's just a starting point for the game's like loadouts as well as your skill trees. There are 4 combat skill trees: marksmanship, gadgets, survivalist, and leader. Almost all of those are self-explanatory, and you can mix and match them as you please. Another thing that was really interesting though actually is that the gear will also change as you play the game, because there will be various upgrade paths for it. So while you will be able to upgrade gear at a workbench like we've seen in a million other games, what is actually interesting is that there will be a couple different paths for this. So you'll have some options between what you can upgrade exactly, which to be fair is also something we've seen in plenty of other games. But combined with all of the other choices and everything they've got going on here, it should hopefully make for an interesting case. And also, this isn't like recent news, but if you're unaware, they're aiming for Q2 2027 for the release of this one. So, I mean, realistically, not all that much longer to go on it. As long as there are no delays, quite possibly less than a year, in fact. Now, those are the 2 big things I wanted to talk about. Well, we still have a couple of others to go. Other than that stuff, there's just a handful of smaller things to mention. For starters, Owlcat is publishing a game called Shadow of the Road. That is still supposed to be releasing sometime in 2026, but no big info there. They've been releasing like trailers and updates and everything though, so my hope is that come Gamescom, they'll announce a release date properly for that, as I do believe Owlcat is planning on being there. Then there's the other titles, Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader and Dark Heresy. On the Rogue Trader side of things, not too much to report there. I just wanted to mention that a couple of weeks ago, they released a patch that I believe finally fixed one of the more annoying Blade Dancer bugs that was going on, where like some of their status effects wouldn't apply. And we are still waiting on word of that final DLC, though again, I'm hoping for like some information come Gamescom for that, as it was initially planned to be out sometime in the fall, I believe, so that would be roughly right on time there. Although, to be honest, with how packed September is going to be, a delay really wouldn't hurt my feelings any, but that's also the case for Dark Heresy. I'm kind of just waiting on word for that one. So we had the beta not all that long ago, made a couple videos on that. It was much improved from the alpha, coming along very, very well. Excited to jump in and play that whole thing. And they've just been showing off some of the standard kind of marketing stuff for it. In the meantime, they did like a wish list milestone thing to add some customization options to your characters there, which with the updated graphics of that might actually be something people are interested in. But mostly we're just waiting on word for the release of that one. To be honest with you, I think they might push it to 2027, just because I think that would probably make more sense, because their options right now, assuming it's, going to be ready to go before the year would be over, which to be clear, I do not know, but assuming it was, your options are basically an incredibly packed September, possibly October, but then pretty much everybody's trying to get out of November to get away from GTA 6. Though if you get too close to Christmas, that can also affect sales. So if we see Dark Heresy released this year, I'd be surprised if it wasn't like an early December type release. Otherwise, it again might get pushed to 2027, but the catch there is they're supposed to be releasing Osiris Reborn in Q2 2027, and I'm just not sure how Owlcat would feel about releasing something that close to each other, if they care about that at all, to be honest with you. I just don't know exactly what their calculus is going to be on that, and I figured I'd mention it, I guess. But that is pretty much it, as we continue to wait for more news about things like their upcoming unannounced projects. And I imagine if we hear anything from them, it will probably be around Gamescom. But that's pretty much everything for this particular video. Like I said, just a lot of little stuff I kind of wanted to talk about briefly that didn't itself warrant an entire video. That said, hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. Let me know how you feel about all this little stuff down in the comment section below. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.